The arrival. The sky was burning. Huge alien ships hovered over the cities, their dark metallic bodies blocking the sun. People ran in every direction, screaming, crying, searching for shelter. The attack had begun. Evelyn stood near the window of an old bunker, watching the destruction above. She was 19, with short black hair and sharp green eyes. Her heart pounded, but she kept her face calm. Her little brother, Ryan, clutched her arm. "Eve, are they coming here?" His voice trembled. Evelyn turned away from the window. "No," she said, though she wasn't sure. "We're safe here. Just stay quiet." Outside, the alien invaders, the Scifi, moved through the streets in tall, armored suits. They were stronger, faster, and had weapons that melted buildings like butter. Their leader's voice echoed through the city's broken speakers. "Humans are weak. Surrender now, and we will spare those who obey." Evelyn's father, Mark, tightened his grip on his old hunting rifle. He had gray in his beard and deep lines on his face. "They think we're weak," he muttered. "They have no idea who they're messing with." Her mother, Julia, pulled Ryan closer. "We need to stay hidden," she whispered. "They've taken over the military bases. No one is coming to help us." The bunker was small, dark, and cold. They had enough food for a few weeks, but after that, Evelyn didn't want to think about it. Then, something strange happened. A faint radio signal crackled through the old communication device in the corner. "Anyone listening? Humans, fight back. Weakness, find the lab." The signal was weak, breaking apart between words. But Evelyn's eyes widened. Someone out there was trying to send a message. A warning. Or maybe a secret. Her father leaned forward, adjusting the dials. "Where is this coming from?" he whispered. Evelyn held her breath as the message continued. "Scifi are not invincible, but you must hurry. Before they..." The signal cut off. Silence filled the bunker. Evelyn's pulse raced. "Did you hear that? They have a weakness." Her father shook his head. "Or it could be a trap." "But what if it's not?" Evelyn insisted. "What if we can fight back?" Mark sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Even if they have a weakness, we don't know what it is. And even if we did, how would we reach that lab?" Evelyn clenched her fists. She didn't know the answer yet. But one thing was certain. Someone out there believed humans could win. And she needed to find out why. A loud explosion shook the bunker. Dust fell from the ceiling. Ryan screamed. Julia pulled him back. Evelyn's stomach twisted. She turned to her father. "They found us." Mark grabbed his rifle. "No matter what happens, you run. Get out of here and don't look back." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "We stay together." Her father didn't argue. He looked at his wife. "Take Ryan to the tunnels. I'll hold them off." Julia's eyes filled with fear, but she nodded. She pulled Ryan toward a metal hatch in the floor. Evelyn hesitated. She didn't want to leave her father behind. Before she could say anything, a loud metallic bang came from outside. The Scifi were here. Evelyn's heart pounded as she followed her mother and brother down the hatch. Cold air hit her face as they entered the underground tunnels. The smell of damp earth filled her nose. Behind them, her father closed the hatch, locking himself inside the bunker. Then the gunfire began. Evelyn clenched her jaw. Every part of her wanted to turn back, but she knew she had to keep moving. The tunnels stretched in all directions. Where did they lead? How would they escape? Then something caught her eye, a faint blue light blinking from an old terminal on the tunnel wall. A radio signal. With shaking hands, she pressed a button. The voice from earlier returned, clearer this time. "If you can hear this, the Scifi's greatest secret is hidden in their own base. Find the lab. Find the truth, before it's too late." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The hidden message. The tunnel stretched for miles beneath the ruined city. Darkness pressed in from all sides, broken only by the flickering emergency lights mounted on the damp concrete walls. The air was thick with dust, carrying the scent of rust and decay. Every sound echoed. Every breath, every shuffle of feet. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest as she led her mother and younger brother deeper underground. Behind them, muffled gunfire still rattled from the bunker above. Her father was fighting alone. She clenched her fists, trying to focus. She wanted to go back, to help him, but she knew she couldn't. Not yet. There was something bigger at stake. The message. It had come from somewhere, and whoever sent it knew something about the Zyphor's weakness. "Mom, keep moving," Evelyn whispered, forcing her legs to move forward. "We have to find a way out of here." Julia, her mother, gripped Ryan's hand tightly. The little boy was shaking, his small frame trembling with every step. He didn't cry, though. He was trying to be brave. The tunnel suddenly split into two paths. Evelyn hesitated. She glanced at the rusted signs on the wall, both unreadable, covered in dirt and peeling paint. "Left or right?" her mother whispered. Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out the small radio device she had grabbed before they fled. The message. Maybe it was still there. Maybe it could guide them. She turned the knob carefully. Static buzzed through the speaker, but then, "Anyone listening? Find the lab. Weakness. Time is running out." The same voice, a man's voice, desperate but firm. And then, something new. "Follow the sound. The signal is strongest near the source." Evelyn's eyes widened. The source. She lifted the device, adjusting the knob. The static grew louder as she turned to the right. A faint beeping noise pulsed in the background, almost like a heartbeat. "This way," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. They moved quickly now, the signal growing stronger. The tunnel walls became smoother, the air colder. And then, up ahead, she saw it. A metal door, half open. It was different from the rest of the tunnel. Newer. Symbols were etched into the steel, glowing faintly in the dark. Zyphor symbols. Evelyn felt her stomach tighten. "This is it," she whispered. She stepped inside. The room beyond was small but filled with old equipment. Monitors, wires, an ancient computer terminal covered in dust. It looked abandoned, but something hummed beneath the surface. Evelyn rushed to the terminal. Her fingers trembled as she wiped the dust from the screen. The Zyphor language glowed faintly, unreadable. "Can you turn it on?" her mother asked, glancing nervously at the doorway. Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she pressed a few keys, trying to guess the system's controls. The screen flickered, then lines of data scrolled across the monitor. A voice crackled through the radio. "If you're hearing this, then you're not too late." Evelyn's breath caught. The voice was clear now. No static, no distortion. A real message. "My name is Dr. Alan Pierce. I was part of Earth's secret defense project. But we were betrayed. The Zyphor knew we were close to finding their weakness, so they struck first. They wiped us out before we could stop them." Evelyn's hands curled into fists. "Betrayed. But I left something behind. The truth. The Zyphor are not invincible. Their strength is a lie. Their power comes from controlling fear, from controlling us. But they have one weakness they can't overcome." The screen glitched. The words flickered. "It's inside their own base. The research lab. You have to find it before they erase everything." Then the message cut off. The room fell silent. Evelyn stared at the screen, her mind racing. "Inside their own base," she repeated. Her mother's face paled. "Eve, we can't. We barely escaped. You saw what they did to the city. How can we possibly get inside their base?" Evelyn took a shaky breath. "I don't know," she admitted. "But this message, it wasn't just a warning. It was a call for help. If we don't do something, no one else will." Ryan tugged on her sleeve. "But Dad..." Evelyn's throat tightened. She thought about him, fighting up there, buying them time. Would he still be alive when they got out? She forced herself to stay focused. First, we have to survive. Then we find that lab." Before her mother could respond, something clicked behind them. The door. It was closing. Evelyn spun around as a mechanical hiss filled the air. The walls trembled. Something was coming. The Sci-Fi drone. It hovered in the air, sleek and deadly, its glowing red eye locked onto them. It had found them. Evelyn lunged for the radio device, pressing every button she could. If Dr. Pierce's message was real, then there had to be a way out of this. The drone beeped, scanning them. A robotic voice echoed through the room. "Unauthorized life forms detected. Surrender or be terminated." Her mother grabbed Ryan, pulling him behind her. Evelyn's mind raced. Then, the terminal screen flashed one final message. "Run. Now." Evelyn didn't hesitate. "Go," she shouted, grabbing Ryan's hand and bolting toward the other side of the room. A second door, smaller, rusted, stood partially open. The drone fired. The blast narrowly missed them, striking the wall in a burst of white-hot sparks. Evelyn pushed through the door, dragging her family behind her. They ran. The tunnels twisted and turned, the sound of the drone's pursuit growing fainter behind them. But Evelyn knew it wasn't over. They had found the message. Now, they had to find the lab. Before the Sci-Fi found them first. The escape plan. The tunnel stretched endlessly into the dark, damp earth beneath the ruined city. Evelyn ran, her breath coming in sharp gasps as she pulled Ryan along. Their mother, Julia, followed close behind, her face pale with fear, but her steps steady. Behind them, the distant hum of the Sci-Fi drone echoed, growing fainter but never truly disappearing. The drone wasn't giving up. It was hunting them. Evelyn's mind raced. The message from Dr. Pierce had changed everything. The Sci-Fi weren't as powerful as they seemed. They had a weakness, and it was hidden inside their own base. But first, they had to survive. "We need to find a way out," Evelyn whispered, glancing at her mother. "There has to be an exit somewhere." Julia nodded but didn't slow down. "Tunnels like these usually lead to old escape routes. We just have to." A sudden roar shook the tunnel walls. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Ryan yelped, grabbing onto Evelyn's arm. What was that?" Evelyn's stomach twisted. That wasn't the drone. Something else was down here. She slowed her pace, straining to listen. The sound was distant but unmistakable, a deep, guttural growl, like a wounded animal, echoing from somewhere ahead. "We can't go back," Julia said. "We don't have a choice." Evelyn clenched her fists. The message had warned them. This tunnel wasn't just an escape route. It was a path to something bigger. And whatever was ahead might be connected to the truth they were chasing. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. The tunnel widened as they moved deeper, the walls now covered in strange markings. Not human. Sci-Fi. Symbols glowed faintly in the dark, like veins of fire running through the stone. "What is this place?" Ryan whispered. Evelyn shook her head. "I don't know, but it's not just a tunnel anymore. This was built for something else." Another growl. Closer this time. Evelyn raised a hand, signaling for silence. Julia pulled Ryan close. The air had changed. It was thicker, heavier, like something was breathing with them. And then she saw it. At the end of the tunnel, a massive metal door, half open, revealed a chamber beyond. The walls shimmered with alien technology, pulsating with faint blue light. But that wasn't what made Evelyn stop. It was the creature standing in the middle of the room. A Sci-Fi hybrid. It was twice the size of a human, its body a grotesque mix of alien and human DNA. Half of its face was metal, its limbs unnaturally elongated, its eyes glowing red. It was hunched over, its breathing ragged. A failed experiment. Evelyn's pulse raced. The Sci-Fi had been experimenting on humans. Her stomach twisted. This was proof that the Sci-Fi weren't just invaders. They were trying to change something. But why? The creature let out a low, pain-filled snarl. Its body twitched, its metal limbs clicking as if struggling to function. Then it turned its head and looked straight at them. "Run," Evelyn gasped. The creature lunged. Evelyn grabbed Ryan, yanking him backward as its massive claws slammed into the ground where they had stood just moments before. The impact sent shockwaves through the tunnel, knocking Julia off her feet. The hybrid roared, a sound of pure rage and pain. It wasn't fully in control of itself. Its body glitched, its metal limbs struggling to move. It was broken. Evelyn's eyes darted to the door ahead. That was their only chance. "Mom, get to the door," she shouted, pulling Ryan toward the entrance. The hybrid charged again, but its movements were jerky, unstable. It wasn't attacking like a predator. It was reacting, like an animal trapped in its own skin. Evelyn's mind snapped into focus. It's still part human. It doesn't understand what it is. Her mother was almost to the door when the creature let out a high-pitched shriek, making her freeze. Then, without warning, it spoke. "Help me." Evelyn's blood ran cold. The creature's voice was distorted, mixed between human and machine, but the desperation was real. Evelyn's mother hesitated. "Eve, it's one of us." "No," Evelyn said, her voice sharp. "Not anymore." The creature twitched, then its expression shifted. For a brief second, its eyes flickered blue, like something deep inside was trying to fight back. Then its body convulsed. The red glow returned. The Scifi's control had reactivated. It screamed. Evelyn grabbed Ryan and ran through the door. Her mother followed, slamming the heavy metal shut behind them, just as the creature's claws struck. A deep metallic dent caved into the door, but it held. Silence. Evelyn's chest heaved as she backed away. Her mind spun. The Scifi weren't just controlling humans. They were turning them into something else, and whatever they were planning, it was far worse than an invasion. Ryan clutched her arm, his small fingers digging into her skin. What was that? Evelyn swallowed hard. A mistake. Julia's hands were shaking. "We have to keep moving." Evelyn nodded, forcing herself to breathe. "Yeah, but we're not just running anymore." She turned, looking ahead at the path before them. It led up, toward the surface, toward the Scifi base, and toward the truth. She set her jaw. The Scifi thought humans were weak, but they had made a mistake. They had underestimated her, and she was about to prove them wrong. The forbidden truth. The underground tunnels had changed. The walls, once rough and crumbling, were now smooth metal, humming with faint energy. Glowing Scifi symbols pulsed like veins of light, casting eerie blue shadows along the narrow corridor. Evelyn felt a chill crawl up her spine. They were inside Scifi territory now. Ryan clutched her hand tightly, his small fingers trembling. Julia, their mother, stayed close behind, her eyes darting nervously at every flickering light. No turning back. No running now. The encounter with the hybrid creature had changed everything. The Scifi weren't just here to conquer Earth. They were experimenting. And worse, they were trying to change humans. Evelyn's grip tightened around the stolen radio device she had taken from the secret chamber. Dr. Pierce's words echoed in her mind. The Scifi's greatest secret is inside their own base. Find the lab. Find the truth, before they erase everything. She glanced at the device, adjusting the frequency dial. The signal was getting stronger. Somewhere up ahead lay the answers. Somewhere up ahead, the Scifi's greatest fear was hidden. The ghost city. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into something shocking. A massive underground chamber. Evelyn sucked in a breath. It wasn't just another tunnel. It was a city. Or at least, it had been one. Skyscrapers made of sleek metal rose toward the ceiling, but they were damaged, crumbling. The glowing signs flickered. Hovering transport pods were abandoned, frozen midair. The streets were silent, littered with shattered glass and broken machines. It was like an entire Sci-Fi colony had been wiped out. Ryan whispered, "Where is everyone?" Evelyn took a cautious step forward, her boots crunching on shattered stone. "I don't know," she admitted, "but this place is old, like something happened here a long time ago." Julia frowned. "The Sci-Fi did this." Evelyn shook her head. "No, the damage wasn't from an invasion. It looked more like a catastrophe, a battle, or maybe something worse." She turned her attention to a nearby holographic panel, its screen still flickering with symbols. Carefully, she reached out and tapped a few buttons. The screen lit up. A distorted voice crackled through the speakers. "Project Genesis was a failure. The test subjects resisted. Sci-Fi casualties, 98%. Human subjects, uncontrollable. Lockdown initiated. All records deleted." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. What the hell did that mean? Genesis? Julia murmured. What were they testing? Evelyn turned to the abandoned city around them. Test subjects. Resistance. 98% Sci-Fi casualties. Her heart started pounding. The Sci-Fi weren't just experimenting on humans. They were trying to control them. And they had failed. The survivor. Before she could say another word, a sound echoed through the city. A low mechanical groan. Evelyn froze, motioning for Ryan and Julia to stay silent. The sound came again, this time closer. Heavy footsteps. Someone, or something, was here. Slowly, Evelyn turned the dial on her radio. A faint voice came through. Who are you?" Evelyn's pulse raced. It wasn't a Sci-Fi transmission. It was human. She pressed the button to respond. "My name is Evelyn. We're survivors. Who are you?" Silence. Then, the footsteps moved faster. Evelyn tensed, raising the small knife she had taken from her father's bunker. The shadows shifted. And then, a figure stepped out from behind a broken pillar. A man. He was tall, human, but different. His skin was pale, his eyes sunken but alert. His arms were covered in strange, glowing scars, pulsing faintly with blue energy. His clothes were torn, military gear from Earth's old forces. Julia gasped. "You're human." The man stared at them, his gaze sharp and unreadable. Then, in a hoarse voice, he spoke. "I was." Evelyn's breath caught. "What does that mean?" The man exhaled sharply. "It means I'm one of the last survivors of Project Genesis." The truth of Project Genesis. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the radio. "What happened here?" The man glanced at the ruined city, his expression dark. "The Sci-Fi invaded Earth because they feared us," he said slowly. "Not because we were weak. Because they knew we were the only species capable of resisting their control." Evelyn's mind reeled. Resisting their control. The man continued. "They took humans, ran experiments, tried to make us like them, obedient, controlled, part of their hive mind. But something went wrong." His glowing scars pulsed. "Humans don't break like they expected. We fought back. And whatever they created inside us, it fought back too." Evelyn shivered. "The hybrid creature. In the tunnels." The man nodded. "A failed experiment. I was one of them. But I survived. I stayed human." Julia looked horrified. Why would they do this? The man looked up at them, his gaze piercing. Because they were trying to find a way to kill us for good. Silence. Evelyn felt the weight of his words press down on her. The Sci-Fi weren't just here to conquer Earth. They had come to stop humans from becoming something more. Ryan clutched Evelyn's sleeve. "Eve, what do we do now?" Evelyn's jaw clenched. "We go to the Sci-Fi base." The man raised an eyebrow. "That's suicide." Evelyn met his gaze. "Maybe. But that's where they're keeping their final research. That's where we find out exactly what they're afraid of." The man studied her for a long moment. Then, with a small smirk, he said, "You remind me of the ones who fought back." Evelyn didn't blink. I plan to finish what they started." She turned, gripping the radio tighter. The Scifi had tried to wipe out Project Genesis, but they had failed. And now, Evelyn was going to find out why. The mission begins. The underground city faded into the darkness behind them. Evelyn, Julia, Ryan, and the mysterious survivor, who called himself Jack, moved cautiously through the ruined tunnels. Jack had been one of the first humans captured by the Scifi, experimented on as part of Project Genesis, yet somehow he had survived. Now, his scars glowed faintly, proof of the failed Scifi experiment to break human will. Evelyn's mind was racing. The Scifi weren't invincible. They had feared something about humans, something they tried to erase before it could spread. Now, the only way to find out the full truth was to go straight into the Lion's Den, the Scifi military base. The infiltration plan. Jack led them through a series of narrow tunnels, moving like someone who had done this before. "The base isn't far," he muttered, "but it's crawling with Zephyr. We won't last 5 minutes if we walk in the front door." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "So what's the plan?" Jack smirked. "I know a back door." He stopped beside an old metal grate, half buried under debris. He crouched, pried it open, and gestured inside. A narrow ventilation shaft stretched beyond, leading directly underneath the Scifi base. Evelyn swallowed. "What's on the other side?" Jack's expression darkened. "A research facility, where they did things to us." His fingers curled into fists. "But it's also where they keep all their biological research. The truth is in there." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "Then that's where we're going." Julia hesitated. "Eve, are you sure about this?" Evelyn glanced at her mother and brother. "We didn't come this far to turn back now." Jack gave her an approving nod. "Then let's move." One by one, they crawled into the ventilation shaft. Inside the enemy's fortress, the shaft led them deep under the Scifi military complex. The air grew colder, the hum of alien machinery vibrating through the metal. They finally reached an exit vent. Jack carefully pushed it open, peeking through. His jaw clenched. "Bad news," he whispered. Evelyn inched forward, peering out. They were above a massive laboratory. Rows of containment pods lined the walls, filled with strange, half-formed creatures suspended in glowing liquid. Some looked almost human. Others were twisted mutations of Scifi and human DNA. Failed experiments, just like the hybrid in the tunnels. But that wasn't the worst part. Standing below, Scifi scientists moved between the pods, monitoring the experiments. Their bodies were tall and sleek, their insect-like eyes glowing with cold intelligence. One of them was speaking in their strange, guttural language. A nearby hologram flickered to life. Evelyn's blood ran cold. The image wasn't just a projection. It was a human brain scan. Lines of Scifi text scrolled beside it. Evelyn nudged Jack. "Can you read that?" Jack's face was tense. "Yeah. And you're not gonna like it." Evelyn braced herself. "Tell me." Jack exhaled sharply. "They're mapping human brain patterns, trying to figure out why some of us resist their mind control." Evelyn's stomach twisted. "They still don't understand." Jack shook his head. "No, but they're close. And if they figure it out, they'll know how to break us permanently." Evelyn clenched her fists. This was it. The Scifi hadn't just come to conquer humans. They had come to erase the one thing that made them different. The ability to fight back. The distraction. Jack scanned the room. "We need to get to the central console. That's where they store their research. But how do we get past them?" Julia whispered. Jack smirked. "Leave that to me." Before Evelyn could ask what he meant, Jack pulled out a small metal device from his belt. He pressed a button, and a low-frequency pulse vibrated through the air. Instantly, emergency alarms blared. The Scifi scientists froze. Screens flickered. Lights dimmed. A computerized voice crackled over the speakers in their alien language. Evelyn didn't understand the words, but she knew what it meant. The base was going into lockdown. The Scifi scrambled, rushing toward the exits. They thought there was a system failure. "Move," Jack hissed, dropping down into the lab. Evelyn and Julia followed, landing silently on the cold metal floor. Jack rushed to the central console, typing in commands. "Come on, come on." Evelyn kept watch, her heart racing. She could hear the Scifi soldiers mobilizing in the distance. They had only minutes before this place was crawling with them. Jack suddenly cursed. "Damn it. It's encrypted." Evelyn stepped closer. "Can you break it?" Jack clenched his jaw. "Not in time. We need an override key." Evelyn turned to Julia. "Mom, watch Ryan. I'm getting that key." Julia's face paled. "Evelyn, no." But Evelyn was already moving. The high-risk gamble. She spotted a Scifi scientist near the exit, fumbling with a control panel. He wore a metal gauntlet, a security device glowing with green light. That was the override key. Evelyn took a deep breath. One shot. She grabbed a metal rod from the lab table, then ran straight at him. The Scifi turned, but he was too slow. Evelyn slammed the rod into his wrist. The scientist hissed, stumbling back. The gauntlet snapped off his arm, clattering to the floor. Evelyn grabbed it. The Scifi lunged at her, but before he could react, Jack fired a stolen Scifi weapon. The scientist collapsed. "Nice move," Jack said, catching his breath. Evelyn tossed him the gauntlet. "Now open the DAN system." Jack worked fast, pressing the device to the console. The screen unlocked, data flooding in. Evelyn and Julia leaned over his shoulder, scanning the information. And then, they found it. The truth is revealed. The Scifi research logs confirmed everything. They had discovered something unique about humans, something they feared more than anything. Human willpower wasn't just strong, it was contagious. When one human resisted, it created a chain reaction. One fighter inspired another. One act of defiance could spread like a virus. The Scifi had been trying to erase the very thing that made humans unstoppable. And that's why they had to eliminate Earth. Evelyn's breath caught. They were never just here to conquer us. They wanted to stop us from spreading. Jack grinned. Well, too late for that. Alarms blared louder. Heavy footsteps pounded toward the lab. Evelyn clenched her fists. They had the truth. Now, they had to survive long enough to use it. The final battle. The alarms were deafening. Red warning lights flashed across the Scifi research lab as Evelyn, Jack, Julia, and Ryan stood frozen, staring at the computer screen. The truth had been revealed. Human willpower was a virus. One act of defiance could spread. One rebel could inspire thousands, and the Scifi had been desperate to stop it from reaching the stars. Now, they knew, and the Scifi knew they knew. The sound of marching feet echoed through the metallic hallways. "They're coming," Jack muttered, gripping his stolen Scifi rifle. "We need to move. Now." Evelyn's mind was racing. The information they had just uncovered wasn't just important. It was humanity's greatest weapon. But what good was the truth if they died here? She grabbed the data drive Jack had extracted and shoved it into her pocket. "We can't outrun them. We need a plan." Jack cursed under his breath. "Yeah, got any bright ideas?" Evelyn's eyes flicked across the lab. Containment pods lined the walls, filled with failed Scifi experiments. The experiments had resisted their control, just like humans did. Her mind clicked into place. She turned to Jack. "What if we don't have to fight alone?" Jack raised an eyebrow. "I like where this is going." Evelyn sprinted to the nearest control panel and started typing. The screen flickered, and Scifi text scrolled across it. She had no idea what she was doing. Jack shoved her aside. "Let me handle this before you blow us up." His fingers flew over the controls. Beeping. The containment pods began to unlock. Ryan's eyes widened. "Eve, is this a good idea?" Evelyn exhaled. We're about to find out. The doors burst open. The moment the last containment pod hissed open, the Sci-Fi soldiers stormed the lab. Tall, armored figures with glowing red eyes, their weapons humming with lethal energy. Their leader, a Sci-Fi general, stepped forward, voice booming in their alien tongue. Evelyn's stolen translator earpiece crackled to life. Surrender. The experiment is over. Evelyn stood her ground. No. The general tilted its head. You cannot win. You are outnumbered. Evelyn's lips curled into a smirk. Maybe, but we're not alone. The first hybrid experiment stepped forward. It was twice the size of a human, its body a mix of Sci-Fi and human DNA. Its red eyes flickered, then turned blue. The resistance was still inside. Then it roared. The hybrids lunged forward, attacking the Sci-Fi soldiers with inhuman speed and strength. The battle exploded. Evelyn dove behind a console as gunfire erupted, blue energy bolts flying in every direction. The Sci-Fi were fast, but the hybrids were faster. Their failed experiments had become the very thing they feared. Jack fired at a Sci-Fi soldier, taking it down with a well-placed shot. Eve, we need an exit. Evelyn scanned the lab, heart pounding. The transport bay. Julia grabbed Ryan, pulling him toward a corridor marked with Sci-Fi symbols for hangar. Jack covered them, his rifle glowing hot. Move. Move. Evelyn ducked past a fallen soldier, snatching a plasma grenade from his belt. She turned, hurling it into a group of advancing Sci-Fi. Boom. The explosion rocked the lab. The ground shook, sending sparks and debris flying. The resistance was winning. But then, a Sci-Fi dreadnought entered the battle. The monster in the dark. The room plunged into shadow as the dreadnought activated its presence. A towering figure of black armor, its red eyes pulsing like molten lava. Jack cursed. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. The general stepped forward, voice cold. You should not exist. The dreadnought raised its arm. A pulse of psychic energy blasted across the lab, sending hybrids and humans flying. Evelyn hit the ground hard, pain shooting up her ribs. She gasped for breath, ears ringing. The general's gaze locked onto her. You are the infection. It reached into her mind. Evelyn screamed as her vision blurred, her thoughts slipping away. She felt the weight of the Sci-Fi control pressing against her will, trying to erase her. No, not like this. She clenched her fists, forcing her mind to focus. She wasn't weak. She wasn't alone. She thought of her father, her mother, her brother, her people. She opened her eyes and fought back. The psychic energy shattered. The general staggered backward, stunned. Evelyn's hands trembled, but she took a step forward. Your biggest mistake was thinking we could be controlled. The general hissed. Impossible. Evelyn smirked. You really don't get it, do you? She turned to the hybrids. You're not slaves. You're not monsters. You're survivors. The hybrids roared in unison. And then, they turned on their masters. The lab descended into chaos. Jack grabbed Evelyn's arm. Time to go. She ran, dodging energy blasts as they sprinted toward the hangar. Hybrids and Sci-Fi clashed behind them, the rebellion spreading like wildfire. They reached the transport bay, a massive hangar filled with Sci-Fi dropships. Jack pointed at a sleek, black transport. That one's ours. Julia and Ryan were already inside. Jack followed, slamming the controls. The ship's engines roared to life. Evelyn turned back one last time. The general staggered from the battle, his red eyes dimming. He stared at her with something that almost looked like fear. Evelyn met his gaze. You lost. She stepped onto the ship. The hangar doors ripped open, and they blasted into the sky. Escape, and the beginning of the end. As the Sci-Fi base shrank below them, Evelyn gripped the data drive in her pocket. This wasn't just a victory. It was proof. Humanity wasn't just strong. It was unstoppable. And soon, the entire universe would know. The last stand. The black Sci-Fi transport roared through the Earth's damaged atmosphere, streaking toward the last human-resistant stronghold. Evelyn sat near the cockpit, gripping the data drive in her hands. She had seen it. The truth. The Sci-Fi weren't afraid of human technology. They weren't afraid of weapons. They were afraid of something they could never understand: human willpower. Now, it was time to use it. Jack piloted the ship with steady hands, his face grim. "We don't have long," he muttered. "That was a military-grade facility we just wrecked. The Sci-Fi aren't gonna let us walk away." Julia checked on Ryan, who sat quietly, staring out the window. The little boy had seen too much, survived too much. But there was something in his eyes now. Hope. Evelyn turned to Jack. "How far are we from the stronghold?" Jack glanced at the navigation screen. "Less than 10 minutes. He hesitated. "If it's still there." Evelyn's stomach tightened. The last human military base was hidden beneath the Rocky Mountains, a place where the remaining Earth forces had been preparing their final stand. If the Sci-Fi had already found it. She clenched her fists. "No, we're not too late. We can't be." Suddenly, the ship's warning system blared. Jack's face went pale. "Oh hell." Evelyn turned toward the cockpit screen, and her blood ran cold. Outside, the sky had changed. A massive Sci-Fi mothership hovered over the Earth, its dark, insect-like body stretching for miles. It was unlike any of their previous warships. This was something worse. A planetary purifier. Ryan's voice was small. "What is that?" Jack's grip tightened on the controls. The Sci-Fi's last move. The mothership's lower panels shifted, revealing a glowing energy core the size of a city. Julia gasped. "They're going to burn the planet." Evelyn's breath caught. "They're giving up on control." Jack nodded grimly. "If they can't enslave us, they'll wipe us out." The realization hit hard. The Sci-Fi knew the truth about humanity was spreading. They had lost the war of control. Now, they were erasing the evidence. Evelyn's hand shook as she clutched the data drive. Everything she had fought for, all the people who had died to get here, it was about to end. Unless they stopped it. Jack turned to her, eyes sharp. "Eve, we need a plan. Right now." Evelyn swallowed hard. "A plan. We can't run. We can't hide. We have to fight." Her mind clicked into place. She pulled up the stolen Sci-Fi data. The research facility had logs on Sci-Fi hive mind technology. If they could disrupt the central signal. She turned to Jack. "The Sci-Fi control their ships through a shared mind link, right?" Jack nodded. "Yeah. Every soldier, every drone, even their big warships. It's all connected to a central eye." Evelyn's eyes burned with determination. "What if we shut that AI down?" Jack blinked. "You mean, hack the Sci-Fi?" Evelyn nodded. "Not just hack them. Break them. If we overload the mind link, it could cause a chain reaction. We won't just stop the mothership, we'll shatter their entire fleet." Jack's lips parted in stunned silence. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his face. "You're insane." Evelyn smirked. "You in?" Jack chuckled. "Oh, hell yeah." Julia looked worried. "How do we even get to their AI core?" Evelyn's expression turned dead serious. "We go inside." The infiltration of the Sci-Fi mothership. The Sci-Fi transport pivoted, changing course toward the massive warship looming above Earth. Evelyn's heart pounded as they dodged incoming fire. Jack flew like a madman, weaving between the Sci-Fi defense systems. Ryan squeezed Evelyn's hand. "Are we gonna make it?" Evelyn squeezed back. "We have to." With a sharp maneuver, Jack dived toward the mothership's docking bay. Boom! The ship crashed through the hangar shield, sliding across the metallic floor in a storm of sparks. Silence. Evelyn sucked in a breath. "Everyone okay?" Jack groaned. "Define okay." The doors hissed open. And standing there, waiting for them, was the Sci-Fi general. The final confrontation. The general stood tall, battle-scared but unbroken. His red eyes locked onto Evelyn. "You again." Evelyn stepped forward, unafraid. "Me again." The general studied her. "You don't understand. You are fighting something greater than yourself." Evelyn's jaw clenched. "I understand perfectly." She raised the data drive. "You lost the moment we learned the truth." The general's eyes narrowed. "Then I will erase you myself." He attacked. Evelyn dove aside as an energy blast shattered the floor where she had been standing. Jack fired his stolen rifle, but the general dodged with unnatural speed. Then he reached into Evelyn's mind. She gasped, visions of fire, destruction, death. The weight of the Sci-Fi's control pressed down on her, suffocating her. "You are nothing." But then, Evelyn pushed back. She thought of Ryan. She thought of her father, who had sacrificed everything. She thought of every human who had fought back. And then, she broke free. The general staggered. His red eyes flickered. Evelyn smirked. "Looks like control isn't as perfect as you thought." Then, she slammed the data drive into the main console. The fall of the Sci-Fi. The mothership shuddered. The AI screamed. Every Sci-Fi soldier, every drone, every ship in the fleet froze. And then, they turned on each other. Without the AI's control, the Sci-Fi hive mind collapsed. Ships spun out of control. Soldiers lost their orders, turning into chaos. Evelyn turned to the general. His body trembled. "What have you done?" Evelyn took a deep breath. "We won." The general collapsed. The entire Sci-Fi empire fell with him. Victory and the future. As the mothership burned, Evelyn and her team escaped. The sky above Earth cleared as the Sci-Fi fleet fell apart. Julia held Ryan close. Jack let out a breathless laugh. "You actually did it." Evelyn looked at the stars. The war was over. But something told her this was just the beginning. Humanity had survived. And now, it was time to rise.